Hey, Bill.
Okay, now I'm open for business.
There you are. Good to see ya.
How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for last minute support in this effort.
It's okay. I happen to be available this evening, which is not usually the case, and love to help out if I can. As I said,
Yeah, I mean, I threw this together at the last minute, and I was like, God, I want somebody that has some knowledge in this to talk to it. And then I reached out to you, and you're like, I can do it. I'm like, perfect.
well, the thing I don't do the writing of these grants. We have a person who has 30 years of experience,
Yep.
and she bats 100%. So I just come up with the content and then she weaves it. But
Yep.
she's very good at the federal grant system is pretty unique in terms of how they make the decisions, and the outside readers and what they're looking for and the requirements they're dealing with are fairly rigid. So you gotta do it their way or forget it.
Yep, that's very true. And yeah, it'll just be nice because we'll have Samantha to talk about what exactly that looks like
Right.
for them. But it'll be nice to have your perspective once, like from the perspective of once you receive the grant, the work doesn't stop. Like
Well,
the implementation and the reporting, and like I just want people to know kind of what to expect and what they're getting into, so they're not kind of caught off guard.
well, the other most important thing, if they haven't got their cage number and they haven't done the stuff with eGov in terms of registration, before you do anything, you have to do that because that can
Yep.
take upwards of a month.
Yep, you need your DUNS number, you need your
That's
SAM.gov. Like you got to get going. Yep, that's
we had to do that last year in a rush, and we barely, because we had all it takes is a misspelling somewhere, in some document that you have filed with the state or with the feds, and you've got to get it all fixed, and it
yep.
takes forever. So,
Yep.
and
So,
we're in the middle of doing an extension right now. I just was working most of the day on to get it because our grant runs out at the end of the month, and we're not finished because of COVID. So I better extend it. Just 1 month is all I need. But
yeah,
I've got to go through
and you
this.
got to work with your grant manager to get that extension and
Yeah,
the why and yep. But they're a partner in it, and I want to help people understand how
yeah. No,
USDA
no,
and your
they've
grant.
been great working with them. So
Yeah,
it's not that's not a problem.
that's awesome. Hey, Samantha.
All right, just getting my two screens going.
All
Hello,
right.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. We have 21 RSVPs.
Okay, so it'll be conversational. I find like those groups are better. The
Yeah,
smaller.
it'll be 21 RSVPs and probably 12 show up, you know?
Yep.
Awesome. And just so you guys know, I am recording. I had a bunch of people ask if we could record it,
Sorry.
and I said yes. Yeah, the
Okay.
feedback. Like, I wasn't planning on doing this much support for like grant stuff, but I just once the ball started rolling and people were responding, I was like, man, there's a big need.
I
That's
got a
why we're
question.
that's why we're trying to get the TA out there for y'all.
Yeah.
Hey, Samantha, we're a nonprofit. Is this eligible or profit making organizations, or is it nonprofit only?
No, for profits eligible as
For
well.
profit. Okay, I never checked that because it doesn't pertain to us. So
Yep. For our
Yeah.
AMS ones, you have to be benefiting two or more producers, so it can't just be like one
Yeah,
private company
right.
doing something. But
Right.
yep, trying to write something down. You didn't want me to talk about regional food system partnership grant, did you, or do you want me to?
No,
Okay.
I think just stick to LF and FMPP just because I think those are going to be the most relevant.
Right.
And also
Yep.
conflict of interest. I'm applying for the regional one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm in for our second grant for the LFPP. So
Yeah.
make that known. We just finishing a planning grant from 2019.
Nice. So you're going for the
Wow.
implementation.
Yeah.
Nice. That'll be really a great. You're the perfect person to talk about this then, because you're like right in between and saw what the money was able to do for the first plot of money, and now what that implementation means for you guys. So I think it's
Well, what's interesting for us is COVID blew it up but also helped it. I mean, it's been a weird year.
It has been a weird year.
We both got beat up by COVID very badly and benefited by it at the same time.
Yep.
And we lost a lot of members who did not benefit by it, and we gained a lot of members. So it's been an extreme contradiction every step of the way, in terms of how our planning turned out, what we discovered by having the extra time, even though it was difficult. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no kidding. Cool. We have 4 in the waiting room. I'm gonna wait until like 3 o'clock on the dot, and I'll let everybody in just so we have a couple minutes. Do you guys have any questions? No.
No.
Okay. So I'm just going to start. I'll do an introduction of Food Corridor, why we're doing this as a technical assistance partner, etc. And then Sam, you'll go first, and I think you have the deck you're going to share, right?
Yeah, it's just like the overview of stuff so that they know and have enough to ask questions about.
Yep, it's just billed as 101, and then we'll turn it over to Bill. And Bill, you can just talk about your experience with applying, how you got it, what it was used for, and then how you plan to apply for the next tranche. And then we'll just leave most of the time for people to ask questions and just have a conversation.
Yep, works for me.
Works.
Awesome. All right.
Samantha, where are you located?
Portland, Oregon.
Oh, you're West Coast. Were you at the 2019? Yeah. Okay, that's right.
I was like, I've spoke to you before.
That was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was Austin and Minnesota.
Right. I didn't go to Minnesota. I was only at Austin, so.
Well, we're going to have a virtual summit this year in September. I just put the website up and I'm getting everything rolling. So here goes all the work.
Yeah. Goodness.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to start letting everybody in.
Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to let folks in. If you can just keep your webinar on mute for the beginning part of the webinar, that would be great so that the speakers can have the floor. I'm going to start and then we'll hand it over to Samantha with USDA and then Bill from Fork Food Lab. And then we'll open it up for the second half of the webinar for questions. So the first part is listening and gaining information, taking some notes, and then the second part we'll have more Q&A. So I'm going to give us a few more minutes to get folks in and make sure there's no one looking for the link still. There's always somebody. I can't find the link. Help me. Okay. Mod. All right. Welcome, everyone. A couple more minutes here to get folks logged in. And iPhone 2. Amanda. All right. For those of you that have just joined us, you'll be entering the room on mute. If you can please stay muted for the first half of the webinar, that will be helpful. We're going to start with an introduction by me. And then I'll hand it over to Samantha with USDA to talk about the grant funding available. And then we'll turn it over to Bill with Fork Food Lab to talk about their experience with their kitchen applying for funds, receiving funds, and then applying for the next tranche of funding to support efforts. So we hope it's really helpful and tangible. And then after they speak, we will open it up to you guys, and we know you're going to have questions, and we'll just have a conversation about everything you learned in the first half. So great. All right, so thanks everyone so much for joining us. We know that this was kind of a last minute endeavor, but the reason you are all here is because the USDA has announced their food projects grant funds. There is significantly more funding available this time around based on the COVID stimulus funds that are available, as well as the Farm Bill, which is the traditional funding for these grants. I'm Ashley Colpaart. I am the founder and CEO of Food Corridor. We are an online platform that helps with the management and operations for shared use kitchens from a technology standpoint. So we have over 220 shared use kitchens across the country and in Canada that use our software to run their operations. I am also the moderator for the Network for Incubator and Commissary Kitchens, which is my passion project that I run to keep this community engaged and to help service with resources and expertise for this growing industry. And I love this industry because I know that shared use kitchens are at the center of the local food system for all of these communities. It's where the entrepreneur finds access to the physical space, the community, and the resources they need to start and grow businesses. And so the work you guys do is the heart of the food system, in my opinion. So I have a special place in my heart for all the work that you guys do. And so the reason why I'm putting this webinar on is because I'm also serve as a technical assistance partner for the USDA in the Ag Marketing Service grants from the COVID response standpoint, and they extended the funding to service providers to help us distribute this information to communities. Again, because there's so much more funds this year, we really wanted to do specific targeted outreach to underrepresented populations that maybe didn't know these funds existed and didn't know that these funds could fund the very work that they are trying to accomplish in their communities. So that is why you're all here today. So I appreciate the fast turnaround and RSVPing for you to be here and get this really important information so that you can access the resources that might be able to help you grow your kitchen to the next level or even open. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Samantha. Samantha has been a partner with Food Corridor and the NIC for 4 years now, and she has attended both of our food incubation summits in the past. USDA has been a sponsor of that summit, and Sam and I work really closely on the COVID response team, and she has asked us to, or had asked me to also participate in the technical assistance part of this. So I asked her in turn to attend this webinar today, since she knows a few of you already from the summits, and because she has the tangible knowledge of the 101 on what these grants really are, what they mean, and how they might apply to your shared kitchen models. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Samantha to the webinar.
Hey everyone, I'm Samantha Schaffstall. Thanks Ashley for that introduction. Yeah, every time I see a stroop waffle in a grocery store, I think of you in the summit because of that was delicious. Nothing's going to compare to it, but yeah, it's been a fantastic experience to work with y'all, to learn from you. And yeah, what Ashley said, we want to make sure everyone knows what funding is available to them. As she mentioned, there's a lot more funding this year. Previous years, there's been about a 26% success rate for applications, and there's been $13.5 million available. This year, there's $38.5 million available for each of the two programs that I'm talking about. So that's, triple the amount of money, almost triple the amount of money available, which will definitely increase the probability of you being able to receive the funding. So we'll just go kind of quickly through this and have it more be an informal Q&A. But we're going to focus on two of the programs that we do in AMS. One being the Farmers Market Promotion Program and the other being the Local Food Promotion Program. There's kind of this umbrella term that you may see called LAMP grants. That houses the Farmers Market Promotion Program, the Local Food Promotion Program, and then two other grants which aren't as relevant to this stakeholder group, but it's the Regional Food System Partnership Grant and the Value Added Producer Grant through rural development. That isn't administered through AMS, which is why I can't really speak to it, but that is one program that you can look more into. And if you have questions about that, you can follow up with me and I can connect you with some of my rural development colleagues that could help you through that. But just wanted to, there's all these acronyms, there's all these terms. So if you see LAMP, that's the same as these programs. This is a really handy tool to kind of help show you there are so many USDA programs, which just indicates how overwhelming it can be to practitioners to try to get access to the funds. So we kind of created this tool to help guide you a little bit around the local food supply chain and what funding sources are available for each of those activities. Highlighted in red are the ones from the AMS grants. And as you can see, they're towards the lower or the farther end of the supply chain. So really about processing, aggregation, distribution, and getting things to market. The first project program I'm gonna talk about is the Farmers Market Promotion Program. These do again, some of the acronyms and names are misleading. This doesn't have to be only farmers market. These are any type of direct to consumer activities. So when you're selling directly to the consumer, they have capacity building grants. Those are more small scale, like single markets, couple of markets. You're doing a market analysis or strategic planning. You're trying to recruit new vendors, those types of 1 to 2 market type setups for building up the capacity. You can use the funds for marketing, for new like tables and tents and that kind of stuff. What's really great about these AMS programs is that you can use it to pay for salaries. So people have used it to pay for chefs to come and do demonstrations or SNAP education, or to even hire a market manager. We know market managers are really underpaid at this throughout the nation, and a lot of volunteer labor there. The second is the Community Development Training and Technical Assistance Program. So that's more the big picture ones. So you're trying to do a statewide or regional training for market managers or for new entrepreneurs, kind of like business incubators for direct to consumer marketing. Technical support for people getting up to date with regulations before they're selling direct to consumer, those types of activities. And you can see kind of the breakdown of what's available. These have all changed from previous years. The high amount of funding, the higher end of the range has all been increased. So capacity building, that smaller grant can be up to $500,000 at this point. And the bigger community development one is up to $750,000. The match is very confusing this year, which is also why the technical assistance experts that we're trying to help train up are going to be of great assistance. A portion of the grant funding has come through the Farm Bill, and a portion of the grant funding has come through stimulus funds. So any of the stimulus funds require only a 10% match, and any of the Farm Bill funds require a 25% match.
And Samantha, when you say match, what do you mean by match? Just for folks that don't really know what that means.
Have done a grant. Absolutely. So if you are asking for $500,000 for federal grants, most require a match, which is to say, I want $500,000. I will provide for, if you're doing stimulus funds, $50,000. And for these grants, they can be either in kind or cash contributions towards the project. It's just saying, I have some skin in the game as well. We're gonna either have volunteer labor, which can be used as in kind, or we're gonna pay for these people, this project manager or something, in addition to the work that you're doing. It just shows that you're also investing in this. So it's kind of the match right now in terms of 10% or 25% is a little too technical for this first 101 webinar, but it's something that you are looking into applying for. Me, a grants management specialist, Ashley, we can all kind of walk you through that.
Samantha, there's a question. Sorry, I'm just going to say there's a question that is related to that. Rachel had asked. Oh, sorry. Does her own labor count as in kind?
It can, if you're doing something new that's if you're doing something that's project related. So if it's outside of the scope of your typical workday and it's something new that's related to this project specifically. So if it's just your normal stuff and stuff that you would have done no matter, it's not seen as an in-kind contribution because it's not for this project specifically. The grant programs are designed to fund projects, not people, is what they say. And so that is just to say, if this is your typical day-to-day and you would have done it without the grant, then it can't be used. But if it's something that's different and it's project related, then it can be used. I hope that answers that question. The second one is the local food promotion program. So this is the one that most likely is what is more eligible for this group of individuals. So this is any time where there's any type of intermediary between that consumer and the farmer. So food hubs, commissary kitchens, shared use kitchens, farmers markets that are consolidators and they don't have the farmers actually selling directly to the consumer, but have like, CSAs or farm share boxes, that kind of stuff. Those are all what fit into this local food promotion program. So this grant is a little different than the FMPP because it has planning and implementation. So you have an idea, you don't know if it's the best fit for you guys, you're trying to expand something or do a new business venture, you can get a planning grant and you can use that to do a feasibility study, a needs assessment, data collection efforts, focus groups, listening sessions, that kind of activity, building a development plan or building an action plan that is to test out an idea. And then there's also an implementation grant. So these are the ones where you're actually implementing an idea. You've done the research yourself, either through the LFPP planning grant or not. You don't have to have a planning grant before you get an implementation grant. You can go straight to implementation. You just have to prove that you have, the history, that you're ready to go, have all the infrastructure in place and everything that you need to be able to do it. But you can utilize these funds to actually implement some type of intermediary type project. So with this one, the planning grant is up to 200,000 and the implementation is up to 750,000. Again, the max amounts are higher this year than in previous years. And there's that weird, maybe 10%, maybe 25% match that you kind of work through when you're developing your application. Even though the additional funding came from stimulus funds, you do not have, it's not required that you have a COVID or pandemic response aspect of your project. However, it is encouraged. You don't get priority points, but it is seen as something that's like given to the reviewers as like, hey, that's something that we have encouraged grant applicants to consider as part of their applications. Another thing that's new this year is that typically if you have a grant, you can't apply for another grant while you still have it. And this year they're wiping that, they're giving a waiver on the number of award amounts, understanding that there's a lot of more funding this year and that people need the support. So you can't apply for a second grant for the same activities, like trying to, get more funding to support that project that you've already been awarded for, but you can apply for a different type of project or need. And so you can have an FMPP and an LFPP at the same time, or you can have two LFPPs, and that's the same. You just have to demonstrate that you have the organizational capacity to manage both awards at the same time, and that you're not duplicating any efforts that were from the original grant. And this also goes for, I don't know if any of you guys have the regional food system grant, which is also under AMS, but if you do, then you just wanted to let everyone know that you are also eligible to apply for FM and LFPP if you or another organization that would want to be involved in this grant has an RFSP. And that's it for the overview, but happy to answer questions.
Okay.
Seeing some chats.
Let's see if there's some specific questions. Is that echo just on me?
Yes.
Trying to. Yes. Let's see. Stop share. There we go.
All right. If we don't have any questions, we can go on to Bill, and Bill is going to talk about his experience applying for these grants with Fork Food Lab. And Bill, take it away.
Okay. We at Fork Food Lab applied for an LFPP grant back in this time 2 years ago, 2019. And we applied for a planning grant. And we need to move to a new facility, and we also needed to better understand where food manufacturing and production was going, particularly in greater Portland, Maine, and within the folks we service and had planned on servicing in the future from that point on. Our current facility is too small. We're at capacity. The guys who designed it initially made the mistake of having more kitchen than storage, and it's usually the reverse is true. You need about twice as much storage as you do kitchen space. So that's one of our very major problems, not to mention the fact we're on 2 floors and no elevator. So we knew at that point we needed to make a move, and we wanted to do it in a way that addressed the needs of our current members and future members. And so the planning grant was the way to go for us. I would like to mention, and Sam can pick up on this as well, that if you are considering going for any of these grants, you do have to have a couple things in place before you can finish the application. It's your DUNS number, your cage number, your SAM setup, and they're not complicated, but they can be time consuming depending on what you have in place and what you have to get. But they're absolutely necessary to apply. And so the first thing you want to do if you want to apply is to get that going and out of the way. Because if there's any bump along the road, and all these are dealt with, my understanding, it's all dealt with outside of USDA. These are the overarching agencies that look at grants and grants management for all of the federal government. And you need to get through those. You need to have that in place. So start today if that's something you want to do, and get it taken care of if you haven't done so. And my advice would be to do it anyway. If you're ever going to apply for a federal grant, you have to have this system in place. So just do it. The grant process, I think what is, if you have written grants before, what's going to be maybe challenging, was challenging for us initially, was trying to figure out what we're applying for and who is going to be reading our and reviewing our grant. And USDA uses outside readers to read and score. You don't know who they are and what their backgrounds are, but usually they have a fairly good background in the type of work we're all working on. So you can't be mushy. You can't be, sort of have a presentation that at the end of the day doesn't add up or doesn't make sense. It's got to be to the point, and the instructions are very clear. You got to follow them. It's the nature of the beast, and you can be saying, well, that's not fair, or this should be this way. It is what it is, and you got to follow it and do it. But I think what's great about this program is from the time you apply, which is the application is due to a third week in June, to the time is about 2.5 months. If you've got the grant or not, and that's at least in the nonprofit world, that's a very quick turnaround for most programs. So it's not like you have to wait a year or 6 months or 9 months. It's very quick. The second part of I think it's important to know, in our case as a planning grant, because it was planning, we knew we wanted to do to get to the end of our term, and what we want to have in hand to take the next step in in our acquisition and developing of a new location, but it's not always clear how you're going to get there. So the things you're asked to put into the grant typically, and the resources you're going to utilize, you have to make a good educated guess up front and be pretty clear about that. And you may have to change them along the way. We had to change a number of things over the past year, in part because of COVID. I mean, one of our consultants disappeared during COVID, so we had to replace that person. We had to change the order of which we did some of our work, in part because of COVID. So there's always the ability to make modifications if they're legitimate modifications when you have your grant. You can't go in and change your outcome. If you got the money to do conduct a certain activity or have a certain outcome, you can't come in and say, okay, now I want to change my outcome to something else. That won't fly. But I think overall, our experience with the folks at AMS and USDA, very supportive and very understanding, and work closely with us to do what we needed to do to get through the grant.
Bill, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
Just specific to what your outcomes for Fork Food Lab. I know you mentioned that that the planning grant was to analyze the move to a different building. Was that the outcome? Was it a specific, you wanted to do a strategic planning, or you wanted to do a facility analysis, or what was the actual outcome?
There are several outcomes, and in the grant you'll have an opportunity to spell these out by category, and you have subs as well. So it's not just an outcome. Our global outcome was we need to find a new facility and to have that facility designed and matched to the needs of our members and future members. Within that, there are several pieces. One, maybe the most important thing we did was to have a market analysis done. And it really gave us an in-depth profile of our alumni members, of our current members, and where the markets were going in different processing and consumer packaged good items. It's a 60-something page document that we had completed in February of 2020. By March of 2020, it was out of date. COVID essentially blew that up, and we got a permission to update the study, which we completed about 2 months ago, which gave us a rather improved picture. It wasn't necessarily a different picture, but a much more precise picture of where things were compared to where a year ago. And that has really formulated our plan, particularly around how we're going to equip and design our facility. I mean, it really, if we hadn't done that, this never would have happened. We might have guessed at some of this stuff, but we had no hard evidence. Now we have a lot of hard evidence, and we have the pieces in place to do the business model, the new business modeling that we wanted to create for this facility, some of the initial floor concepts, not final designs, but just conceptual designs around workflow. And in particular, what we're going for now is a complete inventory list and design for equipment for what we're calling tabletop manufacturing, processing, and packaging, to help members scale their production beyond the stovetop. I think many shared kitchens and incubators are good at the stovetop area. As you get into the more in between, large scale production and small scale batch production, that's a tricky area, because you really can't set up 10 different manufacturing lines. You got to set up one. And what we're doing is looking at now equipment's going to be on wheels and creating manufacturing lines for small batch as well as packaging on the fly, depending on what's being produced. So it's going to be a very different use of our space than we had initially envisioned, at least for part of our space anyway. So that's where a planning grant can can be extremely helpful in paying for things that you may not have the resources, probably don't have the resources to do on your own, but can be very helpful to securing your future.
Great.
We are in the process of now doing round two. We're putting an application in for operationalizing what we just did the planning for.
Can you talk a little bit about how you did your match?
The match we did because about half of our money was spent with using consultants to help us with various aspects of the plan. We asked each of them to put in a match of their services, which they did, and so we basically negotiated, saying, okay, yeah, this may be your hourly rate. Can you give us X more hours, or can you reduce your rate by a percentage, and we'll use that as a match as well. And we got them to commit to that, put that in writing as part of the piece. And as part of that, we also, because we were using a lot of local agencies for this, it also became part of the support mechanism for Food Lab. I think, in my mind, I think there's one thing I want to mention here, that if you can, it's important to gather who is supporting you, whether they're supporting you directly through contribution of time or resources, or supporting your effort because you're part of an entrepreneurial ecosystem that's developed in your area. It's really important that you have documentation of that or support letters around that, because that creates it provides a platform for who you are within your community, and that's an important part of this process. You can't be a sort of a loner out there trying to do this and not interacting with the rest of the entrepreneurial ecosystem that's working on food and the food network in your area. So having support letters, whether they be just raw support letters and or folks that are going to be working and contributing to your effort, is absolutely critical, at least in my mind. Sam, you might want to pipe in on that as well.
Sam, do you want to mention the importance of partnerships and being part of the local regional ecosystem, and how that plays into your application being more likely to get funded?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen again. I have the RFA up and just wanted to give a brief explanation. I have the chat up, but that's not what there we go. That's what I'm trying to share. It should be there now. Let's see. Let me try that again.
It was there for a second.
It was technology these days. It's fine. Well, I'll get it. So just a quick view that people don't always understand is that federal grants are very, very strict on the evaluation criteria. So for private dollars or philanthropy, telling your story, having photos, telling the whole, that can be a really great selling point for, Kickstarter and that kind of stuff. For federal grants, the review panel it sticks pretty strictly to the evaluation criteria because it's competitive. There could be audits. There's going to be likely some controversy. There's very little wiggle room outside of it. So in the RFA itself, there is the evaluation criteria. And one of my best pieces of advice when you're writing a grant is to answer all of the questions in the evaluation criteria. So you can see alignment intent, technical merit, achievability are all topics, but then there's also this expertise and partners. So when you're writing the grant, it's not to say that you'll find the partners or that you can do it yourself. It's really trying to think, how can we create this project successfully? Who are the actors that need to be involved in order for it to be successful? Do you have letters of support from those partners to say, yes, not only do I exist as a human, but I have signed on to be part of this project if it's awarded? Those types of things all are questions that are asked of the reviewers when they're answering this specific evaluation criteria bucket. and specifically, outlining who's going to be on the project team and also having those letters of support really put it over the edge. For these projects also, you need to benefit 2 or more producers. So private entities are eligible, but you need to have partnerships in order to show that you're benefiting at least 2 or more producers. The more the merrier, but you at least have to check that box to be able to be eligible for the program. And in general, partnerships can just be fantastic, especially if you're trying to get a $750,000 grant. This might be your first grant. Maybe a fiscal sponsor can be of assistance, or another partner who knows who has done this before. It's just ways to build up organizational capacity.
That's a great question from Rachel.
Let me get it up. Are they hard to administer? They can be, and Bill can speak to this. The reporting requirements aren't as large as other federal reporting requirements, but they still can be difficult. And this year they are moving to annual reporting, so not quarterly reporting or mid-year reporting. You'll have an annual report. If it's a 3-year project, you would do 1 report at year 1, 1 report at year 2, and 1 report at the end. The only other reporting other than that is to these are reimbursable grants. If you're trying to buy a big piece of equipment or something, there's ways to talk to your grants management specialist to see if you can get that money up front before purchasing, but that can just be a really difficult thing to do. But you submit, they're called SF-270s, and that's your request for reimbursement for spending that you've done throughout the grant period. So that's your other form of reporting. But that's
Sam,
where some people—
Can you stop and just clarify what you just said? I think that is a really important point, that it's reimbursable. What does that mean? They don't just write you a check for if you get awarded $300,000, they're not just going to write you a check and be like, here's your $300,000. Can you talk a little bit more about what that process looks like for getting the funding?
And Bill Bill will likely have a better understanding of how to do this properly, but a lot of people, they just do monthly reimbursement requests. Some people do, if they're bigger organizations that can do it, and they do quarterly. But you at the end of March, you submit, hey, so-and-so worked this many hours, we spent this money on this, we did this publication. You submit your SF-270, your grant management specialist reviews it, gives it to the budget office, and then it kind of draws down on your bucket of funding from there. So you're not given everything up front. And yeah, Bill was shaking his head, so he can.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be managing cash flow here. You can't, it takes a little bit of time to submit these things. I think the first one is the longest cycle because they have to get you into the system, and there can be some hiccups around that occasionally. Again, it's part of a lot of information flowing in and having it all end up in the right spot. But once it's in, and you fill out the form, and the first time around, it can be a little confusing, but there's help there, and they can help you through that. The money, I think, I'm just thinking back from the time we submit. If I submit today, well, actually, I did do a submission today or yesterday, actually, and I suspect the money will arrive in our checking account through ACH transfer probably early next week. So we usually within 4 to 5 days of once the submission goes in, it gets reviewed by the grants officer, and then it gets submitted for payment. And that happens very, very quickly. It's not weeks or months of delay. It's within a matter of a couple of 3 or 4 days, depending on what you're submitting. And I think, the point was made about the reporting. We did our annual report back a couple of 3 months ago. When you look at your goals and objectives in your proposal that you got awarded for, that's what you're really checking against in terms of any type of evaluation. What progress have you made in the list of activities you said you were going to do, when you were going to do them, and what were the outcomes of those, and have you completed those, and and you may comment, or you may be asked to comment on what did you learn from that at that point in time, or how did you apply that knowledge from that? point. So it's important to keep all of those in mind and have those in front of you as you're thinking about writing an application for a grant. And then when you get one, you've got to then work backwards from that in terms of your reporting procedure. You can't be talking about something that came along that you now want to do on the side because it looked interesting and was silver and sparkly and go off and run off and do it. As mentioned, there are very strict requirements for the evaluation process, and then there are the same requirements applied effectively to how you expend money and accounting for that. So setting up in your system ways of, if you're using QuickBooks, of creating, I can't remember what it's called now, a project maybe in QuickBooks to help track the money. So when you do the reports, it doesn't take you hours and hours of running through and trying to figure out where the money went and how it was spent, keeping track of the invoices that you have out there that you're paying people to do project work for, and to ensure that your project title and account number or your project number from AMS is on those invoices, so they're clear. There's no discrepancy that they weren't used that way. It's just basic systems 101, but they're very important in terms of not getting caught up in a lengthy audit. Many years ago, I had a action grant. This was a long time ago, a fairly large one for doing some contract work for action. And we went through a DoD audit at the end of that because that was standard procedure. And DoD is Department of Defense, and they essentially are the ones that operate and manage for the entire federal government, the contracting, so for SAMs and the cage number and all of that are part of that system because they are the largest purchasers in the world of services. And so their system is the one that dominates how the federal government buys or grants money. And it's important that you do your best to follow the rules that are in place so you're not caught up spending a lot of time on the back end trying to account for money that you didn't know how you spent.
Yeah, and I think, Rachel, that kind of answers what you were saying. Are they hard to administer? And what's difficult is it's project management, it's tracking, it's making sure that you're tracking towards what you told the government that you were going to do based on the grant, and then being able to prove that the funds went towards those activities throughout and not towards other things or misappropriation of those federal funds. And so you have to kind of be really organized with what you said you're going to do, track towards that with project management, and then have a really good strong budgeting system and tracking system for all of that if you're gonna go through with something like this.
And you can make changes along. I mean, you can request changes. They may or may not be accepted, but you can request them. And certainly a lot of folks had to make changes during COVID, particularly because of timelines. I mean, most people got blown up on those in terms of things couldn't happen when you wanted them to happen. And you may learn something along the way that may not so much require a change, but where a change would seem to make the most sense given the goal you had for the whole project. Again, you can't change those global goals of going in one direction, then trying to head off in another at some point. You can make changes that get you to the same outcome that you had looked for. But if the path may be slightly different, you may have to change a contractor or something to get there. But those are typically something you negotiate with your project manager at AMS.
Yeah, and I just want to put out like a disclaimer out there. This sounds intimidating. It kind of is. There is work to be put in, but the grants management specialists at AMS, they're nice. They're easy to work with. They want you to succeed. It's not like, it does sound intimidating, but it is a very, very, very rare occasion that someone like gets the money taken back for them or has gotten a slap on the wrist or gets in trouble with the federal government. You have to be really not wanting to be compliant. So though this all sounds a little intimidating, the federal government is not trying to take the money back for you. They want you to succeed. The grants management people, if something sounds a little weird, they'll call you before they give the money out. Like it is work. You do have to manage, there is product management aspects to it, but it's not, people aren't trying to set you up for failure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the point, you want to have your standard procedures in place you'd have for your business organization. You don't want to be working out of a shoebox with your receipts and your accounting system. You do have to have that type of support, and all organizations typically have that, and that's just important to have it. So it's easy to segregate. So you're not making a lot of work for yourself, because you do have to account for this money within your overall budget or your overall expenditure. And the easier you make that at your end, the easier it will be to submit those reports that are required to do. And we've had, I can say, working with Terry who's our manager at our end, has been great. I mean, she's been very supportive and is helping us every step of the way when we need it.
So there's a question in here, Sam, from Sarah Bajit, and he says, does the initial investment we are about to make count towards the match? And just for some context, they're building their facility, in the process of building their facility and launching soon. Can you speak to that?
No, there's some, like if you're making something 3 months prior to when you were awarded, like loophole-y things, but I really wouldn't. It's more complicated than it's worth to do it that way. All your infrastructure specifically does need to be in place, like buildings. These grants don't fund for any type of building or construction, so it will support, freezer space or the purchasing of equipment, which is much easier if it's a piece of equipment under $5,000. There's a lot more reporting if you try to buy something over that. But it's really just everything's ready to go. You just need to plug something in type stuff. But like I said, it is used to pay for salaries. So I've heard of people who just take the salary money and use it to pay for equipment, and that's their in-kind contribution, and then use the grant funds to pay that person's salary that they would have paid before. So there's ways to move the funds around, use the eligible expenses when you can, and then use take what was eligible and put it into ineligible expenses. And there's workarounds. That's where
the accounting system comes into play, and having a good one, because that's easy to do if you have a system set up to do that. It's tracking what money you're spending where. It's very simple from that perspective.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. That seems to be working really well. Any questions for Bill? Clarifying questions for Sam? We had some questions about resources. If you signed up for using the Google form for this event, I will send you an email with a blog that I wrote about kitchens that have applied for these funds before and what kind of projects they applied for and were awarded. I'll send you links to the grants and how to start looking at that, as well as the slides from Samantha that are summarized. So we'll make sure that you're have all those post webinar for sure.
I have just one
more. It's a good blog too. Y'all should read it.
We have Kachan in there. I'm in Michigan and I'm eligible. Yes, it's U.S. It's a United States Department of Agriculture grant. So anyone in the U.S. We did have a woman, Bailey asked earlier if she's in Canada, and I was like, sorry, Bailey. It's the U.S.
Puerto Rico, all eligible.
And I have one other suggestion, and is to, if you're interested in applying, read the RFP several times. And what I mean by that, you read it once, put it down, maybe you've underlined stuff, go back and read it again, and then read it again and read it again, and you'll be surprised how certain things will morph in your thinking about what people are what's being asked of you, and the questions that are being asked, and the structure of how you write your responses. That sometimes the first and second passes don't give you the clarity until you read it several times. Oh yeah, I didn't see that the first time or the second time. So don't hesitate to do that.
Yep. And
I'd also say, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, okay. I would also say that the previously awarded grants are all up on the USDA's website, as well as final reports for ones that have been completed. And my experience is that people are very generous and forthcoming. And if you see someone who was awarded a grant, 2 years ago or a year ago that's similar to yours or in your area, oh, I've seen that name, I want to connect with them. I've had people just reach out and the person they contacted is like, yeah, here's my application. Like, we're not competition. I'm here to help. We're all a local regional food system. So that's also something worthwhile, just to look at those previously awarded grants, see if something speaks to you, and see if maybe someone wants to help you out. I've had people have pretty good, I can't facilitate that for you, but I've had people have good success rate doing that kind of stuff.
Okay, there's some more questions in here. Oh, I was also going to say, when you're writing your grant, work backwards. Start with your goal that you're like wanting to achieve with it, and then what things are you going to need to do to get to that goal? What are the activities and the object, all that. Right. So work backwards from the bigger goal. Let's see. So I think it was asked, is a grants management specialist awarded to you? So if you receive a grant, you will receive a staff person from AMS that is your grant specialist that you work with through the life of your grant. And that's who you report to. You let them know how it's going. You turn in your invoices, all of that. Is the link for the RFP in the resource list? I will send the links to the RFPs in the post webinar. So yes.
Mm-hmm. And each of the grants management is assigned a state, different states. So like all the New York grants, one person manages. All the Texas grants, one person manages. So nice. You'll have like a cohort of individuals. And many of the grant management specialists hold like weekly or monthly, some of them do, not all of them, they don't have to, but they do like these monthly, quarterly meetings with their cohorts where people can cross share, ask questions, do that kind of stuff. So
that helps build community capacity. That's
yeah.
Let's see. Is there someone available to work with ahead of time? So there's a lot of technical assistance happening right now. I know there's a bunch of additional webinars coming up. Sam, you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so we have funded some technical assistance. We had this big project that Ashley's been a part of called the Local Food System Response to COVID-19. They brought together 17 different organizations kind of doing local food research and impact assessments and innovation briefs. I'll put that into the chat because it's just a cool project. But off of that, some of those organizations opted in to provide technical assistance as related to these programs. USDA provided additional financial support specifically to assist with providing like office hours and technical assistance to Black, Indigenous, people of color, rural and other underserved communities. So there are a group of 9 organizations, Food Corridor is one of them, that have opted in to provide that technical assistance. All individuals are welcome to webinars and to all of the resources that are being put out there, but there is a target to provide additional support to those target audiences. So if you are one of them, we will be putting out like a little newsletter that I'm sure the Food Corridor will send out to you guys as well, but just showing who those organizations are and what they're kind of focusing on. And there's some technical assistance opportunities there for not writing your grant, but for answering questions and reviewing some stuff that you've written up and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Kachan, yeah, that's in Michigan, so yeah, that counts where you're located. You're helping a church to get a shared kitchen network. Are they eligible to upgrade their kitchen? It depends on how you write the grant. It sounds like a capacity building thing, so a planning grant might be good, or even the regional food system network grant might be a good fit for that versus the LFPP, but that potentially could be a use depending on how you write the outcomes for that. And then Rachel, you're not BIPOC, but you're opening a food hub in a predominantly, BIPOC neighborhood. Yeah, if you can, use the data from your neighborhood to show that the impact will impact that broader community. And also if you have like letters of support from people that specifically in that BIPOC community that would be impacted by your project, that would elevate a grant like a proposal like that. Sam, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there's also priority areas within the RFA, and I believe let me see, the ERS low. So there is priorities, and it's an ERS food access map. I'm just trying to get the link for you guys. you put the zip code that you are serving into this atlas, and it tells you, and there's instructions on how to do this in the RFA, but if you're in a low income, low access area that you're trying to serve, you get priority points in the review panels.
Well, yeah, the other thing too is that if you already have members and are serving a community, documenting or doing a member profile of where and who your members are, and that's something we did as part of our early on, but became really a part of our market analysis. So we had some very detailed information about makeup. We have a fairly large immigrant community now in Greater Portland, and food as a way of entering into the entrepreneurial space is key within those communities. And we also discovered a lot. We sort of knew this, but by actually documenting it, we knew we had over 60% of our businesses that were members and past members were women owned and women founded. We found out that over 20% were in the BIPOC, I guess, classification. I hate to use that way, but most of those are from the immigrant, new immigrant community or new American community. And it's important to really understand who you're servicing, because when you start looking out there and start talking to folks, you may not know who's actually looking at you if you haven't done that work yet, or if you're new and want to do something, exploring and understanding the communities that are around you. Because they will be knocking on your door whether you're expecting it or not, and you're better off understanding and planning for that than you are being surprised by it.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, you want to definitely have a good, clear understanding of who you're servicing and who you're going to be impacting with your kitchen project, and what resources you're going to be providing to them. That stuff plays really well with these grants.
And that's harder to do when you're brand new than it is once you started. But it's an evolutionary process in terms of getting that information and understanding it. And because food is, working in the food space is the most difficult thing to do. Anything one could do, whether it's at the production side or at the selling side, and everything in between, and support systems for it. It's not as easily it's not as predictable, and that's where the challenge comes, is trying to predict something with little information. And what you try to do is get as much data and information as you can, so that your path becomes a bit more, again, it's not guaranteed, it's just a bit more predictable.
Yeah, and I would also to tack on to that, you want to show that you've done some of this work on your own first, that you've done some market analysis, you've talked to people, you have partners, you have letters of support. You're not just kind of like, I have this idea, and all of a sudden you want the federal government to support it. You kind of want to show that you've done a lot of the legwork, and now you're ready to kind of take it to the next level based on the information that you've gathered through your own process. So that's also a part of that as well. So
the more you can get, the better, but it's, and it doesn't have to be perfect or the final. It's the beginning of your analysis. You're starting there, and you're going to learn as you go along, and you add to it as you go along. I mean, that's our planning grants certainly did that for us. We know a lot more now than we did a year and a half ago, a lot more.
Yeah, and that's the great value of these grants, and why, again, I wanted to host this webinar to make sure that folks understood like the value that these play in local food systems. And specifically, shared kitchens are just like a melting pot for this type of services, this type of work, economic development, impacting underserved populations. Like, it's all in there. And so being able to tell your story and your narrative, and what you're doing and why you're doing it, and who you're surrounding yourself with to make it happen, those are the types of stories that USDA likes to tell too, and the impacts they want to make. So it's a great opportunity. I know we did talk about, you know, a lot of the risks around these grants and the hard parts, but you know, part of it is there's a lot of funds available, and the work you guys are doing is important. So, you know, hire a grant writer potentially. Somebody mentioned that. If you've never written a grant before, hiring a grant writer that can kind of check the boxes for you and make sure you have everything organized. That's what they do. Like, service providers can really help with this type of thing. So I would encourage you to also do that. So I appreciate everyone coming today. Such short notice. We still had 25 people attend, so that's fantastic. So I'm glad I can get this info out. If you've signed up with your email, so I will send a follow-up with all the resources we mentioned today. I want to give a big thank you to Bill and Samantha for coming and spending an hour with us to talk about your experiences and how important this is to you and the work you do. And thank you for your time today. And there will be a second webinar next week with a consulting firm that works on a lot of food system projects. So sign up for that one as well. And yeah, also the blog post that I wrote that gives the examples of other shared kitchens that have been funded. I thought it would be important just to kind of pull that information so people can see, you know, it can be kitchen related, but it can also be program related. If you're trying to start an incubation program and you want to hire some teachers and build some, you know, classes or things like that. Those are the types of things that can really work well for these grants. So you wish the hour could be longer. That's good. Well, that means we did a good job. Encourage you to read the RFA. If you haven't looked at it yet, like Bill said, download it, keep it by your bed, read it again, read it again. It is extensive, and there's new pieces of information in it every time you read it, and trying to figure out which one you go to. And also pay attention to USDA in their ag marketing service. They have new webinars that are coming up. The more of these that you attend and the more information that you glean, the better equipped you'll be for applying. So appreciate everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Bill and Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Everyone.
Hey, Ashley.
Yeah.
I can make a bit, because it's public document, our market analysis, particularly the second one, which is it's about a 35-page document, but I think the type of data we collected is the types of things people ought to be thinking about in writing their application.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to share that with me before I send out the email to everybody, I'll include that as a resource. I'm sure people would really get a lot of value out of it. That's what I was trying to find, like examples of grants that have been written, just like real tangible stuff that people can see. I think that would be very, very helpful.
I'll send it to you right now.
Awesome. I appreciate that so much. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
All right. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ashley.
You're very welcome.